Hello friends, it's Heather and I'm back today with another book review. I have just finished the book The Man on the Train by Debbie Babbitt. This is a book that I ordered from Amazon, and I do this once in a while. If I need to buy some things from Amazon and I don't have quite enough in my cart for free shipping, I'll throw a book in. Usually a paperback because they'll be probably about 10 bucks. This is one of those that I ordered with an Amazon order. Don't know how I heard about this book, and I had never heard of this author before. She has written 2 other books so far. This one just came out this year in 2024. And I took a look at those other 2 books on Goodreads, but I didn't really have any interest in the other 2. She definitely seems to have an interest in like legal stuff and the law. There is no about the author anywhere on this book that I can read about her. So I don't know if she might be or have been a lawyer or a judge, because she seems to have an interest in the criminal justice system from the perspective of like prosecutors and judges based on the books that she writes. This book is basically a mystery. It's kind of a murder mystery, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And it takes place in the present day, like 2024 basically, in New York City and Scarsdale, New York, and the surrounding area. They go out on Long Island and they go to Connecticut over the course of just a few days. It also takes place 40 years ago in 1984 in the Long Island beach town of Nantucket. The main character is a woman named Linda, and she is an assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. She's very busy with her job. She's a career, prosecutor, and she's married to a man named Guy, and he used to be an author, and he's very into reading and everything, and he works for a publisher, but he's kind of in a dead-end job. He didn't get a promotion, and he's kind of reached as high as he's going to be able to go with the publishing company that he works for, and he's in his 50s. She's a little bit younger. She's like in her 40s. She's more successful in her career than he is. We also find out pretty early on that Guy has a drinking problem. And in the flashback part that goes back to 1984, we learn why and how that started. But at the time that the book begins, he's been sober for 15 years or a long time. They don't have any kids. And they live in Scarsdale, and he takes the commuter train. He is the man on the train. He takes the commuter train into New York City to the publishing company to work every day. It never really says how she gets to work. I mean, she obviously works in Manhattan too, but it never really says if she also takes the train. Would make sense that she would, but they don't actually talk about that, which is kind of weird. Because the fact that he takes the train every day, but that they leave for work at different times, they're never riding together. They never really explain that, so I'm not sure. I don't know why he would take the commuter train and she would drive. That would be weird. That would be dumb. I will warn you, there's a lot of characters to keep track of, especially in part 2. The book is divided into 3 parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And in part 2, which is basically Linda and Pete, who is the detective for the Manhattan DA's office, they go to Nantucket to learn about what happened 40 years ago. And then they're kind of going some other places too, trying to figure out what's going on in the present day. And then it flips back and forth with the flashbacks, if you will, to what happened in 1984, all through part 2. In that part where they're investigating what happened, and when you're taken back to 1984 to learn about what happened, there's a lot of characters to keep straight. So there's a lot of names that they throw out there and everything. The main people weren't hard to keep straight, but like everybody that they talk to trying to get to the truth of it, it's kind of a lot of unnecessary like witness testimony and stuff. So that got a little bit convoluted. But basically the first part of the book is Linda wakes up and Guy is not there. And she realizes pretty quickly that he didn't just leave for work early and not talk to her. He actually never came home the night before. And she doesn't know where he is. And then the police come to her door, and she realizes something is very wrong. And she has no idea what's wrong. She just assumes something has happened to her husband. And I can't remember if they kind of imply that he might be in trouble. So she doesn't really want to talk to them. And they're actually from the NYPD, so they came all the way out to Scarsdale to talk to her, and she knows that's a problem. And because she is a Manhattan assistant district attorney, she can't really be involved with this, and her boss actually calls her and says, you got to stay away from this case. She honestly doesn't know where her husband is or what's going on, but she calls Pete, because they're pretty close, the investigator, and he helps her, and they go off together to try to figure out what's happening and what could have possibly happened to her husband, Guy. Also in part one, we're taken back a little bit, just a few weeks or whatever, to Guy's daily commute on the train to Manhattan and how he meets this woman, Anna, on the train and kind of starts a little friendship with her, if you will, that looks like it's going to have the potential to lead to something more, but it doesn't. I realized by the end of the book that she was probably half his age. There's a reason that he's kind of feels a connection to her, but he doesn't realize it at the time. Supposedly, they're complete strangers. He's just like helping her out with how to use the commuter rail because she just moved out there or whatever. That's the story. Then she's kind of like not in the story anymore and disappears until way at the end. So it doesn't seem like there's anything to her really, but just because he met her and was talking to her in the circumstances that led to that is where the incident that the police are investigating kind of stems from, and why Guy was in Manhattan later than he should have been on this particular day, and why he didn't get home on the train like he should have. And something happened when he was in the city. Something very bad went wrong, and he doesn't exactly remember what went wrong, but we don't find that out either until way at the end of the book. Part one is basically just the background of how Guy takes the train every day into Manhattan and how he met this woman on the train, and then it just kind of stops. And then also the fact that Linda woke up on this particular day and Guy isn't there and she doesn't know what's going on, and she and the investigator Pete start on their own little, it's about 2 or 3 days of mission to try to figure out what's happening and where Guy might be. Okay, that's all part one. Now you notice I've talked before about how I like to read books seasonally. This book could have honestly taken place in any season. It does take place in the summer. Particularly the stuff that happened 40 years ago is the summer of 1984. That's important because it's in the summer when all of the people would come from the city, from New York City, and come out to Long Island and stay there and go to the beaches and all that stuff. But the part that's in present day, it doesn't really matter what season it is. Part two, like I said, does get a little bit tedious. So it's the investigation, if you will, that they're not supposed to be doing, that Linda and Pete are doing, trying to find out what happened 40 years ago in Manitowoc, because that has significance to what happened now. And I can't remember how they make that connection, like why they go to Manitowoc at all. I don't remember, but somehow there's something they figure out that leads them out there. Because this is long before Linda had met Guy. He was like 16 years old. No, he must have been like 18 years old, because they talk about how he just graduated from high school and that it was his parents' gift to him for his graduation to spend the summer in this town in Manitowoc, like hanging at the beach and stuff. And all he wanted to do was go to the library because he loves books so much. He's a huge book fan. There's lots of stuff referenced to books and things, and because Guy's whole thing is books. Some of the things I didn't like about that part two was I liked the part that was in the present day with Pete and Linda fine. That part was good. It was, kind of a trying to solve a mystery thing. But the part in 1984 just really annoyed me because, first of all, these people were just dumb. People make very bad choices and make very bad decisions, and there's a bunch of characters that I really didn't like, and Guy in his teenage youth made stupid choices and did dumb things, and so it was just, I'm sure it was fairly realistic, but it was a bunch of characters that you're not going to like, and you're going to want to yell at them and like, don't do that, stuff like that. Okay. The other thing that really bothered me about that part, and it's throughout the whole book really, is this. Okay. The lighthouse in Manitowoc, supposedly, if that's a real town or not, I don't know. But the lighthouse was a central thing in the story in 1984 in Manitowoc. It was a central location where a lot of stuff happened. Okay? The woman who wrote this book has obviously never been to a real lighthouse in her life. I don't know. She either has never been to a real lighthouse in her life, or she doesn't know anything about lighthouses, because she kept talking about the lighthouse using completely incorrect terminology. I am a massive lighthouse fan, okay? I love lighthouses. I'm absolutely enamored with nautical everything. I love maritime history and the history of lighthouses, and I have visited every lighthouse that I can. If we go anywhere where there is a lighthouse, I have to go to the lighthouse, okay? And I've gone up to the top of many a lighthouse. I live in the Great Lakes region. We have more lighthouses here than like almost anywhere. Michigan alone, I think, has more lighthouses than, it's insane how many lighthouses there are here. I've been to every single lighthouse in the Apostle Islands up in Lake Superior at the top of Wisconsin, which is not easy to do. It's hard to get out to some of them because they're pretty far out. I've been to Outer Island in Lake Superior, which is really hard to get to. So I'm a very dedicated lighthouse fan. I have a whole playlist on my travel channel, which I'll link up here, about lighthouses, okay? I know a lot about lighthouses, and this woman does not. And it was just cringy through the whole book because she kept saying wrong things about the lighthouse. She kept calling things the wrong thing. She kept talking about the roof of the lighthouse. This is the roof of the lighthouse, okay? Nobody's up there walking around. That's not a thing, all right? There's no way to get up there. I think she meant this, like when you go outside of the light. But sometimes she talked about how they like were walking across the roof, like it was some distance. Does she mean the lightkeeper's house? It didn't make any sense. And she kept calling this an observation tower. No, that's the lighthouse. She didn't make any sense. She never referred to like the light being up there. Was it in 1984? I mean, by that time the Coast Guard had taken over operation of most lighthouses in the United States. But was this still a functioning lighthouse? I mean, it kind of suggests that it's not. Was the light still up there? Was it automated? Nothing. She doesn't seem to know anything about how lighthouses work or get decommissioned or still in use, and nothing. She didn't know anything she was talking about the lighthouse. And the lighthouse was really kind of a central character, if you will, in the story. And so the fact that she was talking about the lighthouse so frequently and so incorrectly drove me nuts. So the story itself is good. It actually is a really good story. But the whole thing with the lighthouse just drove me up a wall because she didn't know what she was talking about. Okay, so if you're going to have something like that in your book and you're going to write a book, you need to do some research and go to some lighthouses and learn about them before you try to put that in your book, please. She did obviously know a lot about the law and the legal system. That part seemed extremely authentic, but the lighthouse part did not. So if you are a lighthouse fan like me, it's going to bug you. If you don't know anything about lighthouses like this author apparently does not, then you probably won't care. But you still might be confused as to where the characters are supposed to physically be when she's describing things, because it doesn't really make sense. Okay, and then part 3 was a real page turner and went really fast. And so part 3 was kind of the resolution of everything. And it actually resolved things in the present day and in the past. You should know that a total of, it's a lot. There's actually a total of 3 murders. And I'm not going to tell you which ones are in the past and which ones are in the present because that'll give stuff away. And there's also at least 3 suicides and 1 accident. There's a lot of death. It's kind of a downer of a book. I will tell you that. It's a little bit of a downer. It's very sobering. That's what I wrote in my written Goodreads review that I posted this morning. And it's kind of depressing. The resolution of the case, both the present day one and the one in the past, is quite shocking. I didn't see it coming. I had figured out the present day one, as did Linda and Pete. I figured it out in about the same pace as they did. And that one you could understand a little bit. But the one in the past really threw me. Because in that tedious part 2, I did not guess that what actually happened is what had happened. And when they told us what had happened, it was like, oh. It was really kind of, wow, that was not expected. It was two things about what happened in the past that were really quite distressing and a big reveal. So I like that she did that because it made for a really compelling story. But again, it was kind of depressing. Okay, let me say this. The motivation of the people who did kill someone, who did intentionally take life of others, made sense. Like, their motivation for wanting this person dead, both in the past and in the present, was totally understandable, honestly. But the whole thing around it was so depressing because basically what it came down to was a secret, a lie, and an assumption. So one person, well, two people really, keep a very big secret. And one person flat out lied. And one of those is the same person who keeps the secret. And then another person makes an assumption kind of based on the lie that's completely wrong. And because of that, because of those things, a whole bunch of people's lives are totally ruined. Like, it really messes up a lot of people. It's really sad. And it just kind of goes to show, like, I would say this has a really good lesson that you should not lie, that you should not make assumptions, because a lot of the times if you assume, we know what they say about assuming, makes an ass out of you and me. If you assume something without getting the facts or the actual truth, you're probably wrong. And the secret is terrible. And I actually can't believe that the one character kept the secret that she did, because she really shouldn't have. Sorry, I gave it away that it's a she. But I mean, it's another one where you're kind of like, if you had just said, if you had just told somebody or whatever, everything would have been all right eventually. I kind of teach that to my kids. We can talk about anything and we can deal with anything. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it, but don't keep stuff from me, or don't keep stuff from each other, because keeping a secret is so much worse than just getting out there what it is and dealing with it. And this book really proves that, both from just a life thing and also from a legal thing. It was a good story. It says it's a novel of suspense. It's a complex story. Again, a lot of characters to keep track of in the past. You got to be thinking about it and following along. But part one goes really fast. I read this book in 7 days, maybe 6. I read it quite fast. That's very fast for me. Part one was a real page turner. I might have read all of part one in one night, honestly. And then part two gets long because they got to go through all the stuff that happened in the past. And then part 3 was also really, couldn't put it down. Had to finish it. I finished like probably 7-8 chapters just last night because it was so engaging and so intense, and I had to find out what happened. So yeah, I would recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but just be warned, it's a sobering, kind of a downer of a story. And she doesn't know what she's talking about with lighthouses. But again, this is my review of the book, The Man on the Train by Debbie Babbitt, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you next time.